let's do a tier list. Let's do a tier list for Danganronpa. So I've got the cases here. Right? All the different chapters. So if you guys can remember the individual chapters and you want to offer your opinions on them, we can rank them. Let me start by making the tiers, because I don't want to do something boring like this. Let's put Absolute Cinema at the top. Absolute Cinema. Why is it written it like that? Absolute Cinema. Why the fuck is it written it like that? Or you guys can't even see. Wait, you guys can't even see. Look at this. Absolute Cinema. Okay, there we go. It's written it properly now. And then let's put Above and Beyond. Why is it written it like that? Above and Beyond. Absol Scene. And then let's put Solid. And then I want to put some good. Some good parts. And some bad parts. And then let's put needs a lot of improving. Is that fair? Is that fair for the tiers? Or do I want one more? I'll put needs a lot of work. I think this is fair. This is a fair tier system. Okay, so I don't know how many people in chat have even played every single chapter, but let's try and do it. Do we want to jumble these up a bit? No, let's do them in order. Let's do them in order. 1-1. Case 1-1. So, does anyone have any opinions on the first chapter of the first game? Where do you think this one goes? I already have an idea where I'm going to put this, but I'm curious if anybody has an opinion. Did I miss character tier list? No, Bob, you did not. We're going to do that after. I think that this is a solid case. Right? I think the start of Danganronpa, so the first case, the one with Leon and Sayaka, I think that's solid, right? Because it actually doesn't miss, right? I think it doesn't miss. It hits all of the good parts of Danganronpa for me. It hits all of the good beats. The character who died, the victim, was somebody that we cared about, right? That was Sayaka. She was developed. She was our main girl. So the death was impactful because it was somebody we liked. The killer had a believable motive, which was just self-defense. Self-defense plus opportunistic kill. Very believable, very grounded. The actual mystery didn't have anything overly stupid. The nearest thing to a stupid part of the mystery was the writing on the wall, right? The way that she wrote Leon, the way she wrote Leon upside down on the wall, and none of us knew what it was until the very end. That was like the final reveal of the case. That was the only thing that could be interpreted as being stupid, but everything else was actually like fairly solid. Like the mystery wasn't complicated for no reason. Everything made sense. There wasn't an overly complicated plot. It was just like, but there was enough moving parts for it to still be an interesting case, right? Like figuring out that Sayaka was the aggressor, figuring out that the rooms were swapped and that they had a fight. And the thing about the door and how Makoto's door was different. There was a lot of like little steps, in my opinion. So this was super solid, right? I don't think it missed. There was nothing in here that was bad. But it doesn't go higher because it didn't go above and beyond. It was kind of exactly what you'd expect from a Danganronpa case. It was like an AI-generated Danganronpa case. Maybe not that bad, actually. But it was like a super solid one, right? It was like super safe. It's like if you told somebody to write a Danganronpa case, but if you go too crazy, you get shot. It's like nothing went above and beyond. It was just super solid. So solid for me. 1, 2. This is the case with Mondo and Chihiro, right? This is the one where Mondo killed Chihiro. And it's also the one where we had Genocide Jack and Toko, right? This one's weird for me because... Okay, there's a lot I have to say about this one. That one was peak. I agree. I think this one is above and beyond. This one is above and beyond because it's essentially just a copy of the first case, but with more pieces added in that makes it better. Right? It's like a relatively grounded and opportunistic kill with a believable motive. But then there was some extra moving parts that made it way better, right? Like if you compare the first case to the second case, this was just a normal case. We get into the trial, we sort of figure out the pieces with no suspect, and then eventually after we've put all of the stuff together, a suspect arrives, and then we prove that they're the killer. This one had so many moving parts on top of that, because it also had the whole split personality Toko Genocide Jack thing, where she was the suspect, and there was a whole part of the story in the investigation where we were focusing on that, and then it turned out in the trial that she wasn't actually the killer despite being a serial killer. That was a twist. That was kind of above and beyond. Then they did the whole gender swap thing with Chihiro, where he wasn't actually a girl and he was the boy, and that mattered because of, you know, the gendered locker rooms. So that led us closer to the kill. And then when we got the actual suspect, when we cornered the actual suspect, their backstory at the end was actually kind of a heart-wrencher, and it actually added some depth to it. It wasn't like Leon that just kind of freaked out. It was a real character. So I think this one is above and beyond because it didn't miss, right? So it sort of lands in solid because it didn't have any bad parts, but it also went above and beyond what it had to. So I'm putting this one here. My only issue with it was Makoto took way too long to admit his waifu was gonna frame him. You're talking about the first case, right? I don't know about that. I think I disagree with that. I don't think he took too long to realize that. We learned that Bestie likes feeling up dead bodies. Yes, we did. It could go low cinema or high above and beyond. Yeah, genuinely, this is one of my favorite cases in the franchise. The only reason it doesn't make absolute cinema for me is because the actual cast of Danganronpa 1 is weaker. Like, throughout this chapter, you do have to interact with Hifumi, you do have to interact with Toko, you do have to interact with Hiro. The actual cast is weaker. And of course the trials are also slightly weaker because they're also shorter in the first game, and the minigames are really bad compared to the second and third game. So that's the only reason I'm not putting it in cinema. But I do like this one. Toko is based. Toko is not based. In fact, I will say about Toko, she was good in this chapter. I hated Toko by the end of it because she survived all the way and she was really annoying. But in this chapter, where she was relevant to the plot and she played an important role, I actually really liked her inclusion. She didn't take away from this chapter at all. She added to this one. Like the whole Genocide Jack thing. I didn't even mention Yeah, Genocide Jack was fun, but only in this chapter. Afterwards, she was irrelevant. She was irrelevant after this chapter, which is what made her a drag, and she was just a comic relief character. But in this chapter, it was awesome. I love the fact that the serial killer, we find out who the serial killer is, and it's not the killer. Then we find out that Byakuya set up the crime scene to make it look like they were the killer. And then we find out that he wasn't even the killer, he was just doing it for fun. And then when we find the actual killer, it's still more satisfaction because they're not random. They're actually relevant. They were set up, they had an arc, and they had a good motive. So this is a really good chapter. 1-3. What do we think of 1-3, chat? Do we remember 1-3? This is Celeste. Celeste and the double murder of Hifumi and Taka. This needs a lot of work. This one needed a lot of work. This one was pretty bad. Completely justified? Yeah, I agree. Completely justified to put it here. I know what you're saying, but I think it needs a lot of work. Had lots of potential, fell off from Celeste being dumb. No real motive? Yeah, so the biggest problem with 1-3, I think, for most people, is how obvious the killer is. Celeste is just clearly the killer from the start. Like, the investigation doesn't even begin, and you know it's Celeste. Right? As soon as we're getting thrown around, like running around the school at Celeste's orders, you just know it's her immediately. And the suspicion never ever falls on anyone else in a meaningful way. During the trial, we do suspect other people, but the reader, the viewer, at no point is convinced by any of it. They always think Celeste is the killer, and then she ends up being the killer. It's not like chapter 2, where the viewer actually believes that Toko could be the culprit, and then when it turns out they're not the culprit, and Byakuya set it up, they can believe Byakuya is the culprit. So then when it swaps again to Mondo, the real culprit, it feels like the viewer's being sent on a roller coaster. Whereas on this one, the suspicion of the viewer never actually changes, even if the cast like accuses Hiro for being in the suit, but the viewer never buys it. The first two were more heat of the moment. Yeah, this one was a calculated, this was a big calculated plan, which I think was a good idea, right? For the third chapter, for the first two murders being like crimes of passion, like heat of the moment, for this one to be a big complicated mastermind plan, I think is a good difference compared to the first two. However, the execution was bad. Like, the actual plan that Celeste had was kind of stupid. I don't see how anybody would fall for it. A reminder, if anybody wasn't there, but her plan was basically to stuff somebody in a suit, take a photo, and then hope that evidence counts as enough, right? Like, she just stuffed somebody in a suit and then took a photo with her accomplice being dragged away by the guy in the suit, and then acted like that was evidence that whoever was in the suit was the killer. Which was never going to convince any intelligent viewer. So it just kind of went down really badly. There was a lot of moving parts that made no sense. They didn't achieve anything, really. Like, the way she messed with the time, with the justice hammer sizes, and she tried to convince you that Hifumi was dead, and then he got up and moved because he wasn't dead yet, and he faked his death. The way that was put into the story as a meaningful plot twist, but it made no sense. There was no reason for that to be part of her plan. The only reason it almost worked was because Hifumi was a dumbass. The only cool thing was using the dead body found. Yeah, I think the way that the body discovery announcement played a role in this murder was cool, but they kind of fumbled the bag even on that, because Monokuma didn't set up a rule. Monokuma didn't set up a clear rule that the cast used to deduce the killer. They just kind of realized that it was relevant, asked him towards the end of the trial, and then he gave some info. It was like kind of useless. It was kind of a fumbled bag, like just all around fumble. But yeah, needs work. Definitely needs work. Okay, this is the first one that I think I'm gonna get different opinions on from chat and from the general fan base, which is case 1-4. Case 1-4. This is Sakura's case. Sakura suicide case. What do we think of this one? This is the one where we found Sakura in the room and she drank poison to kill herself. So lame. I agree. I completely agree. I think this one needs a lot of work. I think it's better than 1-3, but it needs a lot of work. It was so obviously a suicide. I don't know why they thought otherwise. Exactly. I liked parts of it. Yes, to be fair, I liked parts of it too, but I think it's doing it too much justice. It's being too generous to put it in good, some bad, because there was way more bad than good. Like this, the problem that this case had was the main problem that 1-3 had, which was that the culprit is obvious. The culprit is really obvious. It's obviously a suicide from start to finish. And the fact that we go through, they kind of did that. They tried to do the 1-2 thing again, right? Where they went from suspect to suspect. In 1-4, we thought it was we originally thought it was Hiro, then we thought it was Toko, then we thought it was Aoi, and then we realized it was a suicide. That's the journey that the cast went on during the trial. However, it didn't land the way it did in 1-2 because the viewer would have never believed it was Hiro. We never thought that for a second. Then when we moved on to Toko, we never believed that for a second. And then the only slightly believable one was Aoi, where I feel like Aoi being the secret culprit was believable, and it was really cool at the moment where we were like, hold on, is it Aoi? Is it actually Aoi? That was really cool. But then, the reason why that didn't land is because it's a better idea. It's a better idea than the suicide. It's a better ending than the suicide. That would have been a better twist if Aoi was the culprit than the suicide. So the fact that we then realize it's not Aoi and it's actually just a suicide, which was our original impression all along, that kind of ruined it, right? That took away from the Aoi twist because the Aoi twist didn't end up being true. It like hyped us up for a really menacing villain for chapter 4, right? Because we thought Aoi and Sakura were best friends, and then we're like, oh my god, did Aoi like kill her best friend? And then we realized, no, it's actually just the suicide, which we knew all along. I still find it insane that this is essentially the only suicide in Danganronpa. I get why it's the only suicide, because the Danganronpa formula is kind of whack with a suicide, because there's no satisfaction when you find the culprit, right? There's no finale in the same way, so a suicide is hard to write in the Danganronpa formula. So I get why there isn't any other suicides, especially because this one like misses because of it, right? This one misses because it's a suicide. If this one turned out to be Aoi as the actual culprit, like, let's flip the script, okay? Let's imagine that we went from Hiro as the suspect to Toko, then to the suicide, but then we realized it wasn't a suicide and it was actually Aoi, and Aoi was the killer. Then it would be this. It would be up here. It would be really good. But the suicide was lame. So it ended up being this. If the whole case focused on Aoi, it would have been better. Yes, I agree with that too. To an extent. it would have to have some more moving parts. I don't think it could have just been Aoi as a suspect the whole time. But the Toko and Hiro parts were very unbelievable, so those were kind of lackluster as well. So if we got rid of those somehow, it could have been better. The entire point of this chapter is it was supposed to be easier if everybody wasn't at each other's throats. Yeah, and I don't think that landed. I personally don't think that landed at all. Because the only reason this case was difficult at all is because Monokuma intervened, right? If we read Sakura's suicide note immediately, it wouldn't have mattered that we were suspecting each other, that we had formed teams. That wouldn't have made a difference. So that didn't really land, right? That theme. Yeah, I don't like this one. I don't like this one. It sounds shallow to say that I don't like the fact that it was a suicide because there was no culprit in the end, right? There was no execution, there was no actual like killer in the end, there was no villain. I think it's kind of shallow, right? But it needed it. It needed that. Like, that's what Danganronpa is. There's a villain for each chapter, there's a culprit. And finding out that the culprit was the victim just did not land, right? It did not land. It needed another rewrite? I believe so, yeah. And then we get into these. This is the hardest one for me to rank. 1.5 and 1.6. I also feel like a big issue was that they didn't know how to write out Sakura believably. Well, somebody getting killed is always believable, right? Even though Sakura was like a beast, it's still possible to kill her, right? It's still very easy to kill her, you know? I feel like it would have worked, right? Imagine my idea where we swapped the suicide for Aoi being the killer. That would have worked, right? Because we could have had a whole thing about how who the hell can kill Sakura? She's so strong. That could have been a main point of confusion in the trial. And then we realize the reason why it was able to happen was because the killer was trusted. That Sakura trusted the killer because it was Aoi. That would have worked, right? That would have hit. That would have been very despairful. That would have been very good for Danganronpa. But they didn't go with that. What even was Case 1.5? Okay, so Case 1.5, we found the body in the garden, right? The body that exploded, and then it was a fake trial. It was a fake trial where they tried to execute Makoto, but then we survived the execution. Right? And then we come crawling back to solve the case for real in Chapter 6. And that's why it's so hard for me to rank, because here's the thing, right? If it's all one chapter, if Case 1.5 plus Case 1.6 was in one box here, it's above and beyond. It's here. Yeah, I feel like Case 1.5 and 1.6 is just one case. Exactly. If it was in one box, I would put it here, because I really liked Case 1.5. I really liked the fake trial. I love how the blame got thrown between Makoto and Kyoko. I love that as a dynamic, right? That fake trial, where we had the suspicion on Kyoko and Makoto, back and forth, that was awesome, because we, the player, knows Makoto didn't do it, so the only other option is that Kyoko did it, but because Kyoko's the deuteragonist, right? She's our bestie. She's the next main character. We also can't really believe that. We find it too shocking. So it was in a turmoil for the viewer, right? I love that concept. And then the fact that the actual solution to the case ended up being the mastermind faking a murder and realizing that it was Junko, that was also crazy. That was a crazy twist. Right? Figuring all that out, that the case was set up by the mastermind and then the mastermind was Junko. Crazy work. But for the ranking, it's hard because they're separate chapters. It's like, how would you rate a normal chapter if it was split into two? I feel like it's hard. So if it was just one, if it was case 1 and case 1.5 and 1.6 together, above and beyond here, but because they are separate, I'm gonna have to put it here, right? Because the some good parts are the actual trial that we had, the trial segments we had were really good. But the fact that it didn't end in chapter 5 meant that chapter 5 itself had bad ending. And the same is true for this. I guess 1.6 is really solid. 1.6 is really solid. It's also kind of this. It's also kind of this. Because it misses the start of the case. 1.6 doesn't have the start of the case. It doesn't have the fake murder and the fake investigation. It just has like a rushed bonus investigation. Plus, I also think the actual ending past the murder, once we like reveal the mastermind and then we get to the rest of it, that stuff is actually kind of whack. I don't like the ending. Like finding out about the outside world and doing all the Headmaster Hope's Peak stuff, that's kind of whack. That's kind of boring to me. I didn't really like that. So I think they both go here in the end. I think they both go here. I have a question. How are you going to rank 3.1 and 3.6 as you're essentially going back to the same trial? Not really. No, not really. This is very, very different, right? 3.6 and 1.6 are the complete opposite of 1.5 and 1.6. Because the main criticism that I'm having about 1.5 and 1.6 is that there's no closure, there's no complete story in case 1.5. You need chapter 6 to have closure in 1.5. And you also need 1.5 for 1.6 to make any sense. They're not independent chapters, whereas in V3 they are, right? Case 3.1 is a complete satisfactory episode. And so is case 3.6. So these will be easily ranked, but these are the hard ones to rank. I liked finding out about Hope's Peak. Did you? I mean, maybe it's just a arbitrary preference, but like, personally, I liked the murder mystery more than the overarching mystery. So like the best part of 1.5 and 1.6 has been the murder. 1.5 would have been crazy if Bestie did it to save you. Yes. Yes. So imagine for a second that case 1.5, let's rewrite it. Let's continue the trial. Instead of having Monokuma rush the ending and try to execute Makoto, let's imagine the trial goes through longer. We keep doing the trial, we keep doing more truth bullets, and we use everything. We come to the narrative conclusion that Kyoko is the culprit. She is the culprit, and she did it to save Makoto. And then she gets executed fair and square. That would probably be an above and beyond case. Because I love that. I love that. But that's not what happened. And the chapter didn't really end. So, some good, some bad. How do you feel about the surviving cast of DR1? We're gonna do a character tier list right after that. So right after the case tier list. So I guess I'll talk about that then. Okay, and that's it for DR1. There are no absolute cinema cases in DR1, in my opinion. This one comes close. This one comes very close. I think what this one needed to reach absolute cinema is it needed to be slightly longer, right? Just extend the pre-murder, extend the investigation, and extend the trial just a little bit. Just slightly longer. And then also it needed to have more development from the characters that were bad, right? The DR1 cast has some really shit characters, like Taka, for example. Taka plays a role in this chapter, and he's a shit character. If he was better, this could have been elevated. In my mind, 2-1 is absolute cinema because it's one of the very few times that you get to use multiple different talents, have them interact. Well, you mean 2-1 or 1-2? We're about to talk about 2-1. But yeah, moving on to Danganronpa 2 now. Case 2-1. This is the Teru murder, right? Teru killed fake Byakuya. He killed fat Byakuya. What do we think of this case? I have strong opinions on this case. Which I think differ from a lot of the fan base. Where was the body? Under the table. How much of DR2 have you seen, Moon? How much of DR2 have you seen, or have you only seen DR3? It was kind of good? Yeah, I think this is generally seen as like a mid case, right? This is generally seen as a mid case by the fan base. I think this is above and beyond. Better than 1-2. Only case 1? Okay. I think this goes here. This is above and beyond, even better than 1-2. This is an incredible trial, or an incredible chapter, in my opinion. I didn't like most of DR2's cases. I'm kind of with you. I kind of agree with you on that. But this is not one of them. This one was awesome. This is above and beyond. The reason why this is so good, in my opinion, is because of a few things. Firstly, it does something that 0 other chapters in the entire franchise do. Right? 0 other chapters in the entire franchise do this. And that is that every single character had a role to play in this case. Right? If you think about it, every single one of the 16 characters had a crucial role to play, which meant not only did they matter to the investigation and the trial, but they also participated in the trial itself with important dialogue, which just allowed every single character to bounce off of each other and show their personality in a way that was just so entertaining. Like, the trial in DR2, case 1, was just so incredibly fun. Like, just to quickly go through it, Byakuya was relevant because he was the murder victim, and he also did some very critical things before the murder. Nagito was relevant because he revealed himself to be the villain who set up the murder, basically, and he played a role in the actual mechanics of the murder. Teru is important because he was the killer, obviously. But then beyond that, Chiaki was important because she kept watch with Monami. Gundam was important because he discovered the under the floor technique because he went to find his earring. Nekomaru was relevant because he needed to go to the toilet, so he tried and he couldn't. Pekka was relevant because she actually was in the toilet. Kazuichi was relevant somehow. I don't remember how, but he was. Ibuki was relevant because she could hear in the dark. Akane was relevant because she ate a ton of food. Hiyoko was relevant somehow. Oh, Mahiro was relevant because she took a photo and gave us a floor plan. I just remember everybody being relevant. He went to the office, he did something, yeah, he checked a certain area. Every single character was relevant. We had to talk to every character, and they played a role in the murder. And I just really liked that. At the time, during this playthrough, it just hit really hard because when the trial happened, the personalities of all the characters just bounced off each other amazingly. It was so entertaining. And even though the killer was Teru, who was the worst character, like one of the worst characters in the franchise, somehow his backstory was really sad, and it made it it made it actually emotional. And also the way he dropped his persona and started talking in a southern accent during the end of the trial, that was also really funny, and I really liked that bit. So even Monokuma and Monami were really entertaining in that trial. So this is above and beyond because It did exactly what a Danganronpa trial wants to do. Byakuya, right, the victim, was sort of an above and beyond choice for a victim, because obviously you recognized him from the previous game, and you thought, why is he here? Why is he fat? And what relevance is he going to be in this game? And then he dies immediately before he reveals anything. Makoto, or Nagito, right? Nagito, who you think might be Makoto, you're not sure, but you're certain that he's relevant. He's like your bestie. Turns out to be a crazy villain. Big twist, you know, above and beyond, that didn't need to happen. And then him not even being the real killer, just setting it up, above and beyond, did not need to happen. So this is a great case, overall. Great case. Okay. Let me take a sip after that. I guess why is it not absolute cinema? I'm not really sure. The reason why I'm not putting it here is sort of arbitrary. It's kind of just because there are better cases that I'm gonna put here, and that's really the only reason. But there's nothing I can really complain about with this case. If I had to complain about this case somehow, it would be -1 for meat on the bone. Okay, I haven't really been factoring this in, but the mini game sucks, right? The rhythm game for Danganronpa 2 was really bad. I think the worst thing about this chapter was probably... Oh, also, I should clarify, the pre-murder is relevant. The pre-murder scenes, right before we find the body, they do factor in. I have factored them in, I've just not really talked about it. It's pretty good on this one. I really liked the throwing a party to get everyone together and distract from, you know, take away the motive to kill and get everyone together. I loved that, and I liked the blackout before the murder, before the body was discovered. I think that stuff was really cool too. If I had to criticize 2-1, it would just be... I don't know. I don't know how to criticize it. I think it would probably just have to be Teru Teru. Just the fact that Teru Teru is like an annoying character, and he is in this chapter. And Nekomaru is a cringe character too, and he is in this chapter, of course. That would be like the only criticism. I really like Ham Hands. Ham Hands. Yep, Ham Hands was Byakuya. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this will do for now. I think realistically, I don't have a reason why it doesn't go here. I think this is like the top tier. Realistically, on like logic, this is the top tier. I've just got this extra tier reserved for the ones that I know I personally like even more. So I think that's really all it is. Teru is fun when he was talking in the accent. I agree. That I mentioned this already. Even though he was annoying, during the trial, and like after the trial, actually really cool. His backstory was awesome. Kinda. His backstory was emotional. And him turning into the foreign accent, or the southern accent thing, was really cool as well. That was really funny. I loved how Monami kept translating his words, and she kept struggling to translate it as he got worse. That was really funny. Anyway, case 2-2. Case 2-2. This is Mahiru's murder, right? Peko murders Mahiru. What do we think of this one? This one's definitely worse than 2-1. This one's definitely worse than 2-1. Is this the justice one? This is the one where Fuyuhiko is, you know, Peko is Fuyuhiko's, like, bodyguard, and that's why she kills. It had the video game where we play the video game that Monokuma made. aspect was good, not gonna lie. I think it's really dumb. One last thing about case 1. Fan of the aftermath in general, learning Terra was trying to stop a different murder and setting up Nagito's deal. Yes, I didn't really mention it too much, but the way that Nagito was outed as the villain, and he ended up being the true villain of that chapter, despite not being the killer, was above and beyond. That was great. I love that stuff. But yeah, back to 2-2. So many paths crossed in this case. The video game stuff was real bad. I think this one is a some good, some bad. Because there was some good stuff I liked about it, but there's kind of slightly more bad stuff. Rocks in the swimsuit. Okay, yeah, so the the what's it called? The video game. The motive. The video game was kind of annoying to play. I didn't like the video game because actually playing through it was kind of a drag. The concept was cool. When I first played through it, right? When you're like, oh my god, we get to play as a little game within a game, that's cool. But then once you've done it for like a couple minutes, you realize this game is bad. Like playing these characters called Girl E, Girl A, Girl B that you can hardly tell apart because they're not even voice acted and they don't indicate who's talking very well. It's really annoying to play and really hard to follow. And then you have to go and do it again in the investigation. It was kind of a drag. One thing I did like about the game was I liked how they slowly allowed it to dawn on you that they were the existing characters in the game, right? Like Girl A, Girl B. I liked how the dialogue slowly gave you the impression of who it was, but it didn't tell you outright, and it made you realize it. I thought that was cool about the game. However, the way the game actually played out, and the way you have to solve it in the trial, the way that it relates to the actual murder, doesn't really land for me. We never addressed Shorty murdering a schoolgirl. Correct. This is a running theme, but when somebody murders outside of the killing game, we never really address it. We never really punish them for it. Which was just so fucked up. Yeah. The actual murder... Yeah, the good parts of this murder, in my opinion, were like the... Honestly, what even were the good parts? Like, I want to say the pre-murder stuff was good, but it wasn't even. The pre-murder stuff wasn't even that good, right? Because, like, what was the pre-murder stuff? It was just Kazuichi invites Hajime on this weird, creepy stakeout where they just watch the girls when they get their swimsuits on. Like, there was not much going on in the pre-murder. It kind of dragged, I think, as well. Honestly, this is kind of bad. I think I need a... It might even be here. It genuinely... Now that I'm talking about it, it might be here. But it feels wrong to put it here, because it's way better than these. Monami rule sharking, good part. Nobody ever brings it up, but I kind of get Toko, because she has a split personality. Yeah. I mean, sure. I guess. But it's kind of a moral dilemma that you would feel like a real person would have, and nobody ever had that. Nobody ever mentioned it in the first game. I don't think it needs a lot of work. I feel like I need another tier, actually. I feel like I'm gonna make another tier. Right? Let me make another tier. And we'll put like mostly bad. And it goes here. I think the big issue is Peko just kind of killed her while what's his name was trying to figure out if his sister was dead. A lot of people have different interpretations of the ending of like who did what and why, because it wasn't super clear, right? Which I think is probably a big problem with this that I'm gonna touch on now. The actual kill in the end, once you like get to the post-trial and you figure everything out, there wasn't a lot of clarity on what exactly went down beat for beat, right? Because they implied that Fuyuhiko was going to kill Mahiru, but they also implied that he was hesitant to kill Mahiru and didn't want to. And then when Peko killed him, right? When Peko killed her, there was that clarity was like not added. It was amplified because we didn't know if Fuyuhiko was actually going to do the kill or not. So when Peko killed her, we have no idea if that was to prevent him from being the Blackened, or if it was just a silly plan that Peko came up with, right? Like, there was in the end, there was no clarity on whether her plan was always to actually try to pretend that he is the Blackened via the rules because she did it as a tool for him, or if that was just a guise in the moment to try and trick Monokuma there and then, right? There was no clarity whether she thought that was always going to work, or whether she just did it as a last attempt in the trial. Because you could also believe that she killed Mahiru so that Fuyuhiko had no chance of killing Mahiru, right? If you think about it like this, right? Imagine you're Peko, you see that Fuyuhiko really wants to kill Mahiru, but he's struggling. You know the rules of the game, you know that if he kills, he's going to be executed if he's found out. So, in order to save him from that, you kill Mahiru, so that he has no motive to kill anymore, and will never be the Blackened and therefore never executed. If that's her motivation, that's fine, right? That actually works as a character, if it's clear. If it's communicated clearly that that's exactly what it was. But this chapter only implied that. It only implied that that was one of the options. It didn't make it super clear, so I didn't really like that. Pretty sure it was clarified. She knew her work was his blade and did so to save him. I don't think it was clear. I don't think it was clear because not to sound too arrogant or anything, but I think I would know if the text made it clear. I think I would know. Because, like, I'm pretty smart, I'm pretty sharp, and I played through this with a whole chat helping me out. Plus, I played through this game multiple times. I think I would know if her motive was made clear. Putting more thought into this than the actual writers? I don't know. I feel like all Danganronpa chapters are actually well written, like in terms of time. I feel like they're well thought out, and there's a lot of effort that goes into making the writing perfect. I just don't think they miss a lot, right? I think they don't land the mark in the end, but I don't think any of it's actually lazy. I think they thought they were cooking here, right? I think they thought they were really cooking with what they did with Peko. I just wish it was clear. I wish it was clear whether she did it to stop Fuyuhiko from having to kill Mahiru, or if she did it the whole time with the plan to make him escape as the Blackened in that murder, you know? The weird part would be if the objective was to protect him. Covering up the murder the way she did was just as dangerous. I'm not sure I agree with that, because as long as she knows she's the killer, there is no danger of us not figuring it out, right? Because if the trial goes bad and Hajime can't figure it out, she can always reveal the truth, right? Fuyuhiko would never get executed in that trial, right? Because she would always confess at the end. So I'm not sure if I agree with that. I feel like it was more of a last minute twist. I think you're strongly mischaracterizing the writers. Danganronpa is not a game that is written case by case. This is not a reality TV show or something. Like, The whole game is written with care and love, and it takes a long time, and every single little detail is changed. Like, nothing is written independently. It's not like a TV show. Nothing is written last minute. There's no such thing as that for Danganronpa. These games are written well in advance, fully written before any of it's released. I don't think there is such a thing as a last minute change. Shit gets changed last minute all the time. I mean, literally, yes, literally. And in fact, Danganronpa did go through some writing changes that we do know about. So literally, yes, there could have been some like internal stuff, but you don't get that vibe at all. There is actually no evidence for that beyond what we already know. Like, none of the chapters, none of the Danganronpa games feel like rushed writing to me. All of the stuff that I dislike about it feels like an earnest attempt to be good by the writers, and it's just me that happens to not like it. I don't feel like anything is bad because it's lazy, if you get what I'm saying. Like, I think it's just the writers had a different opinion than we do on the bad parts. I don't think any of it was written lazily and sloppily. None of it feels that way. Except for maybe one chapter. Except for one chapter, which I think may have been victim of lazy writing, rush decisions, and that's this next one, 2-3. 3-1 was written maliciously? No. No, it was not. 3-1 is a good chapter. I'm gonna be singing 3-1's praises. The fact that you can't clarify her motive makes it weird. We got a whole case and she misleads the group like the rest of the murderers, so it's hard to believe she killed to be the Blackened and go through that process of being discovered. Oh, hello Ember. Thank you for the raid. Hello, hello. Welcome in. We're doing a Danganronpa tier list right now. Mboo. Hello, hello. Yeah, Yojo dude. I do agree that... Well, okay. Pekko's motive was never to be the Blackened and escape. That was never one of the options. She was always trying to get Fuyuhiko away during the trial. She was always trying to get Fuyuhiko to be the Blackened, but I like to interpret it as... The way I interpret it, because I think it's the better story, I choose to interpret it as she killed Mahiru with the intention of just taking the burden off of Fuyuhiko. My interpretation is that. I like to see it that way because I think it's better. I think she killed Mahiru so that Fuyuhiko could not possibly kill Mahiru because she's already dead. Right? I like to believe that's why she did it. Even if it cost her life in the trial, I think that's why she did it. And I think the whole pretending to be a tool thing to make Fuyuhiko potentially the Blackened was just a bonus. That was just a plan. That was just a cherry on top, right? She could try that in the trial, but that was never the only goal. That wasn't the reason she murdered. Even the Shining Justice was just to frame herself better. Yeah, she did the Shining Justice thing to make us vote for her. And then she would flip the twist after the vote, saying that she did it for Fuyuhiko, hoping that Monokuma would rule Fuyuhiko as the Blackened. Yeah. My big problem is that they have no memory. That they are mad. Wait, what? My big problem is that they have no memory. They have no memory, and they are mad they couldn't get information out of Mahiru? I'm not sure what you mean. Anyway, I think this is mostly bad. It doesn't hit here. It doesn't go down here because I don't think it needs a lot of work. I think all this case needs to be good. I think for all this case needs to be solid is rewrite the video game, right? somehow write out the video game part of this, right? Take out the video game part of this chapter, do something else, and then make Pecco's motive clearer and perhaps slightly different. That would be how to make this case good, in my opinion. If that was changed, it could be really solid. Anyway, let's move on to 2-3. Okay, what do we think of 2-3, chat? This is the only case in the series that I agree with Catboy could actually be the victim of rushed writing and sloppy rewrites. This is the only example of that, in my opinion. And for context, there is a confirmed rewrite of Danganronpa 2. In the original script, Danganronpa 2, Fuyuhiko was going to die in this chapter. Instead of Hiyoko, Fuyuhiko was going to die instead of Hiyoko. That was the original script, and Hiyoko was going to survive until the end, just like Fuyuhiko did. But then they decided to swap them on a rewrite. That is a confirmed fact, so it's possible that that played a role in this case being so bad. This case needs work. This case needs work. This is 2-3. 2-3 is the worst case in the series. Holy fuck, is it so good? Really? You think it's good? This is the worst one in the series. 2-3 is the lowest. Agree? I remember the murder being interesting, but I don't remember a whole lot else. It's Garbo, but so many plot holes. There is yes. Unlike the rest of the game, so the rest of Danganronpa has plot stretches. It has a lot of plot stretches. This is the only case that I think has genuine plot holes, like genuine internal logic inconsistencies and impossibilities. This one is the only one that has plot holes. The only thing I liked about it is the nurse lying about the cause of death. Yes, that was good. Genuinely, there was some good parts of this chapter. Let me start by singing the praises of it. There was some good things about this chapter. I really liked Monokuma's movie, right? Remember Monokuma's Wizard of Oz parody? That was hilarious. And the concept of an imitation murder was also kind of interesting. I loved those parts. And I also liked Mikan, the way she acted when she was found out as the killer. I liked how she acted. I think it was cool to see her break down. But other than those few things, the rest of it is just so bad. It's absolutely trash, but at the end it became valid. Yeah, you need the case 2-6 gives you context for why Mikan did what she did, which is already a bad thing in my opinion. Like, the fact that it doesn't really make sense why Mikan would do this until you get the finale twist of us being remnants of despair. The fact that it doesn't make sense until then makes this chapter worse, because when you experience this chapter, you never get this. You don't get this information. The worst part of 2-3, by far the worst part of 2-3, is the despair disease, right? I understand what they were going for. The despair disease makes the hospital relevant and the nurse relevant because she's the ultimate nurse. I kind of see the theme, but what the despair disease did was so bad. The despair disease, it robs every character that it infects of their character, right? It literally took away the character of every character that got infected, right? Mikan was no longer the Mikan that we knew, right? It was cool. I liked infected Mikan's personality. However, that didn't matter. It would have been better if Mikan was secretly that all along, instead of her changing into it because of the despair disease, right? And it's even worse with the other characters, right? The way that they removed Nagito from the story by just robbing him of his character was awful. They removed Akane from the story by robbing her of her character. And then the worst part, by far the worst case of this, is Ibuki. Because Ibuki's actually the victim. She dies in this chapter. And she doesn't even die with her character. Her character, as we knew it in the first 3 chapters, doesn't play a role in why she dies. Because she just gets turned into a gullible idiot by the despair disease. And that's it. That's the end. That's the end of her story. It was really bad. Mikan had to film the fake suicide, follow Hajime in the island, block the music room's camera and doors, then sprint all the way back to the hospital and pretend she was there the whole time. You could have done a lot about it. You mean Hajime? Hajime could have prevented this, yeah. Hajime could have done a lot about it. Yeah, it was just bad. There was one other thing that I liked about this chapter. But it ends up making it worse rather than better. And that is that, do you remember? I know it's kind of obscure, but do you remember what was happening in this chapter before the despair disease showed up? Right? Before Monokuma introduced the despair disease. Do you remember what was happening? The arcs that were being set up, the stories that were happening, they were really good. They were really promising. Because this was Hiyoko coming to terms with Mahiru's death. It was Fuyuhiko trying to be forgiven. Those two trying to be enemies, or rather Hiyoko trying to be enemies, but struggling to. There was some good character arcs being set up, and then they just dropped out of nowhere. The despair disease just yeeted them off stage, stole center stage, did nothing, resulted in a murder that only existed because of the disease. And then those previous arcs never happened because Hiyoko was dead. So it had high potential. The first the first couple of hours of playing through this chapter are good, and you think this is going to be a great case. The character arcs are really cool. But then they end up not mattering. So it was really bad in the end. Yeah, and there was also plot holes. One plot hole that was never addressed is that... Do you remember how we went inside Hiyoko's room and Sonya was in the room? Right? We unlocked the room. Wait, what did it... Okay, it's done. We went inside Hiyoko's room, we got the key, unlocked it, and Sonya was already inside the room. Right? And she could not have gotten in there. There was no way she could have gotten in there. It was impossible. That was never explained, never addressed. Yeah, so this is the worst. I think it's worse than 1-3. It's worse than 1-3 because for a character-driven story, like Danganronpa, stealing the characters of your characters is like a cardinal sin. That's like the worst thing you can do in a character-driven story. So it's even worse than 1-3 in my opinion, because at least Celeste was Celeste. She did the murder because of her actual personality, right? And Hifumi and Taka did their thing in the story because of their actual characters. Whereas the despair disease just turned all of the relevant characters into zombies. Uncharacters your character? Exactly. There was no conversation about the kill of the yellow short girl? Yes, correct. We never found a murder weapon for Hiyoko. We never found a murder weapon. The whole idea of the reason she was killed was because she walked in was kind of speculation, and we never really proved it. We didn't have a lot to say about Hiyoko. Yeah, really disappointing chapter. 2-4. Chapter 2-4. This is the one in the fun house. This is Gundam killing Mechamaru. What did we think of this one? Peak? We like this one. Your favorite? It's not my favorite. This one is not my favorite. This is far from my favorite. This one's weird. Can't kill a clanker. I think this one is in some good, some bad. I think this one goes here. Hyperill, hello Machine Guru. The story is whatever, but the gameplay and puzzles is the best. Yeah, so let's talk about it. This has some good parts and some bad parts, so I think it belongs in this category. Why couldn't the princess have done it? She was boring. Honestly, sure. I think this whole case was pretty bad. But it had some good parts. So let me talk about the good parts first. First of all, I think the mystery of how the two rooms or the two areas are positioned, the way that they misled you at first, and then it turns out one's on top of the other, the geometricness of it was alright. I liked that. I thought that was alright. I think the actual execution of it might have been a bit frustrating because they might have taken a long time to figure it out. But conceptually, I think that was a cool twist, right? The funhouse was cool. One thing I wish they did was the octagon. Yeah, literally the octagon, right? So it was mentioned very briefly in the actual trial. Chiaki mentioned it. The room called the octagon was called the octagon because it had 8 sides, right? And the way that you actually got 8 sides geometrically was by putting the hexagon on top of the circle, right? Or whatever it was. The two houses on top of each other. And I think that was really cool. I kind of wish that was how they figured out the orientation of the building. And the way that the orientation of the building was used as the murder weapon was pretty cool. I think that was pretty cool. Another good thing about this case is the Nagito puzzle room. When you swap to Nagito's POV and you play through the final dead room, that was pretty cool. It was pretty fun. The light puzzle infuriated me. The light puzzle is cringe and ruins it so much because it could have been amazing, but the concept was great. The Zero Escape puzzle room, yeah, it was peak. I had to look it up, I'm so mad. Like, we took a long time, right? We solved the puzzle room, we solved the rest of the puzzle room in like 10 minutes. And then we were stuck on the light puzzle on stream with chat trying to help me for like almost an hour, right? It was like half an hour we were doing it. We had to get like paint out and start writing things down. It was frustratingly difficult because I think there was just no clue. There was just no appropriate clue. Because you feel like there's a lot of options for what the light puzzle means, and there's kind of no indication of which option is the right one. And then the actual right one was like pretty far down the list of intuitive options for the solution. So even though it made sense, there was obviously other things that you would try first, and that kind of made it annoying as a solution. But the concept was cool. The Russian roulette thing that Nagito did, very cool. Nagito getting the secrets and not Hajime mattered a lot for the plot, and I liked that. So yeah, cool. Good things about this chapter. And then there were some bad parts. The bad parts for me, first of all, looking at the graphics for Strawberry House and Grape House was straining, to say the least. The graphics were obviously miserably lazily bad, and why we had to put up with that instead of an actual environment was beyond me. Why, like, why did we have to put up with that, like, PS1 style low budget Andy assets, right? With just the scrolling PNGs on the entire texture of everything in the room. Why couldn't they just build a real environment? I have no idea. That was annoying. It kind of took away from the vibe quite a lot, if I'm honest. Oh, the music finished. Here we go, more music. Yeah, it took away from the vibe a lot. The textures, the fact that they were really bad. And then the other thing that I disliked about this chapter a lot is Gundam at the end, right? They kind of did the same thing with Peko, where they made the motive for the kill ambiguous, right? They kind of hinted at what Gundam's objective was, but they never made it explicitly clear, which kind of did the same problem as with Peko, where it's kind of up to interpretation why Gundam did the kill, which should not be the case, right? Like, maybe if you want to make it really, really relevant that the culprit's motive is not known, you could do that, but I don't feel like they were trying to do that. I feel like they just accidentally left it ambiguous. I think we could have had a much clearer explicit motive for Gundam, because in the actual text of the trial, did it? I thought it leaned into him wanting to help his friends. Well, exactly, right? It leaned into it. That's not explicit. They implied that he chose to fight Nekomaru, and Nekomaru chose to fight him back because they both mutually knew that if one of them died, then the rest of them would be free to eat again, and they would live, right? And they didn't mind who died. They were both willing to sacrifice themselves, so they decided to just fight, right? Just have a battle. But that was never made explicitly clear. That was only implied, right? That was only implied. They never really said that for sure, especially with Nekomaru, because he was dead and he didn't have any dialogue. But Gundam wasn't clear either, right? It was unclear whether Gundam did it to sacrifice himself for everybody. And what also doesn't really make a lot of sense is if he did do it to sacrifice himself, why did he try to hide it so much, right? Like, why did he let the trial happen, you know? Like, why was he attempting to escape, you know? Why would you do it and kill two rather than one? Yeah, that's the other thing, right? It also doesn't make sense that if you're willing to sacrifice yourself, why not kill yourself, right? Why not kill yourself? Because then the other person survives, right? I think chapter 2 would have made a lot more sense, and personally, it would have gone in solid. I think it would have gone in solid if we fixed this issue. Maybe it would have still been bad because I didn't like the textures, but that's not too big of a deal for the story. It probably would have gone in solid if there was a rule in Danganronpa 2 against suicide. If suicide did not count as a kill, then it would have made sense. And if Gundam's motive was made explicitly clear at the end of the trial. If that was cleared up, it would have been great. -1 for killing off Best Boy? Who is Best Boy? Gundam? Also, I have to comment on the motive here. I think Monokuma locking you in the funhouse and saying no escape until a murder happens, no food until the murder happens, I think that was a really bad motive. I think that was a really poor motive from Monokuma, because it essentially just forces a murder to happen, which eliminates complexity, right? Like in a lot of the other trials, the characters themselves make the murder. Monokuma's motive encourages it, but it's the characters' dispositions and beliefs and positions that they're currently in, mental states they're in currently. It's their relationships that result in the murder specifically. Whereas this one was so forced by Monokuma that like anything could have happened, you know? Like imagine if Gundam didn't do that. Imagine if Gundam and Nekomaru didn't do that. Somebody else would have killed and it would have been forced. It was really arbitrary, right? It was really forced. And it didn't feel right. It didn't feel natural. It didn't feel interesting, because obviously somebody's gonna kill, and the reason is almost certainly just because Monokuma forced us to. It's not like 2-1 or 2-2, for example, where the actual kill is motivated by personal relations. I felt like case 2, the motive was only for 2 people. Case 3, the disease was bullshit, and this one was 100% forced. Yeah, all the motives were bad. Yeah, the motives were bad in Danganronpa 2, weren't they? Right? Because in case 2-2, the motive was targeted to just like 1 or 2 people. In case 2-3, the motive just robbed people of their personality. This one essentially just forced you to kill. What was the motive in the first game? In the first case? I don't remember the motive. Did Monokuma have a motive in the first one? I don't remember. Oh, it was memories. It was the memories. You got your memories back if you did a murder. That was the motive. So yeah, I think case 2-4 goes here. One thing about Danganronpa 2 in general is that the cases are slightly more engaging than Danganronpa 1, just because they're a little bit longer, a little bit livelier, and the mini games are a bit better. Yeah, the cast was better. The motives had to be bad. The cast was so good, their motives had to be bad. But that doesn't make sense, right? If the cast is good, if you have well-written characters, then surely the interrelations that result in murders should come more naturally, right? Because you wrote deeper characters. It's definitely a failing on the writing. And then case 2-5, okay? What can I say about case 2-5? This is absolute cinema. This sells the whole game, right? 2-5 is cinema. I think we can agree on that, right? Does anybody not think 2-5 is cinema? Best case? It's the best case, right? This is absolute cinema. And it's entirely carried off of the back of the trial and Nagito's plan being so fucking cool, and the revelation of it being so cool. This one's the best, right? I want to sing its praises because obviously it's the best. There's not really a lot to talk about, but it's just the best. Because Nagito's plan, for those who don't quite remember, was to weed out the traitor by forcing the traitor to kill him. And he was forcing the traitor to kill him against their will by tricking them, right? But he didn't know who the traitor was, so he relied on his ultimate luck, right? He just relied on a roll of the dice. And in chapter 2-5, it wasn't really made clear. It was kind of a mystery still, whether he wanted the traitor to win the trial and escape, or if he wanted everybody else to beat the traitor to get rid of the traitor. it was unclear whether which one he wanted, and then we found out in the finale, we found out in chapter 2-6 that he actually wanted the traitor to survive. Anytime someone talks about not liking Danganronpa 2, you still got people having to give props to case 4 or case 5 for how good it was. Yeah. It's just such a simplistic idea, but it just bombed. It was just the bomb, right? It hit you like a bomb, because Nagito's plan being so sinister, it overshadowed the killing game itself, right? Like the killing game was already a sinister idea, and Danganronpa plays into it with a lot of his cases, a lot. And Nagito did something even more sinister, right? He used the class trial rules as something, that's normally quite dark and evil and center stage, and he sidelines it because his plan was even more sinister. And it was so simplistic as well. It was so simplistic, right? It wasn't really that complicated. They just tricked them into picking the fire grenade with the murder, with the poison in it for the murder. So it was beautiful in its simplicity as well. It's even one of the few cases that uses the character's talent really well. Yes. Nagito's look was a consistent thing for his character throughout the whole case. But this one really, really climaxes it, right? Like, all the characters reference their talent a lot, because a lot of them are just written that way, in like this one-dimensional way, where they talk about their talent a lot. But in Nagito's case, it was such a crucial plot element the whole way through, right? He was obsessed with his ultimate look. It showed up in chapter 1, it showed up massively in chapter 2-4, and then it climaxed in 2-5, where, like, you realize why, from a writing perspective, why he's the ultimate lucky student, why he has that luck. It's so that this trial can happen, which makes it good writing, right? It's not just an arbitrary character trait given to some other characters that they then have to reinforce through their dialogue. This was written with purpose. So, like, it climaxes his character in such a peak way. This is the best case in the game. This is the best case in the series. And really, this is like the reason why this case and this case don't get absolute cinema, just because there is one case, right? There's some cases that go even more beyond, right? And it's this one. This one is the best. I like how all the cases use the talents in 2. Yes, this is a thing about 2. Unlike unlike Danganronpa 1. They use the talents in every case, right? Danganronpa 2, case 1, Teru uses the food to hide the murder weapon, and he uses a cooking utensil for murder. Chapter 2, Peko uses her sword to escape in a way that nobody else could. In chapter 3, this one doesn't hit hard. This one feels forced. But Mikan is a nurse and lies about the cause of death, right? And also the fact that she has access to the patients because she's the nurse, so she has the opportunity to kill Ibuki. In chapter 4, Gundam uses his hamsters to turn off Nekomaru, right? The only way to get behind the clanker and kill him was with the hamsters. And then in chapter 5, Nagito uses his look, right? And that just makes chapter 5 even stronger, right? Because it's a continuation of the pattern that they've done the whole time. So it's not even random. It's the 5th installment of this pattern, and it still lands so well. It's not forced at all. It's just such a peak case. Such a peak case. And then 2-6. Okay, what do we think of 2-6? This is where your opinion on 2-6 for me. This is where we find out what kind of what kind of Danganronpa fan you are, in my opinion. How you rate 2-6 tells me a lot about what you like about Danganronpa. Shit. This is mostly bad. Where is the send it to hell tier? That's basically what this is, right? I didn't see it, but Monomi is the GOAT. Hype moments and aura chapter. Yeah, I was considering putting it in some good, some bad. Because if there's one thing that's good about this, the best thing about chapter 2-6 is... The best thing about 2-6 is the hype moments and aura, right? It's when Monomi takes down Giant Junko. It's when Giant Junko shows up and it's cool and scary. It's when we do the mini games towards the end where we're like, we've got all those weird, freaky, trippy trial mini games, and like we're shooting hope at people and it's epic and aura and Chiaki comes back. Those are the best parts. Those are the good parts of 2-6. But the rest of it was bad, and that's most of it. So I think it does go in mostly bad. I think it's mostly bad. It's worse than 2-2 because it's not even a real trial. So the pre-trial, right, the investigation, was really bad because it was literally just exposition dump. It threw you into Hope's Peak Academy and it said, go from room to room. In each room there is literally a book on the ground. Literally a book on the ground that just you read and there is story exposition in it. It was so forced, so just exposition dump, so lazy. We got all the information, we went into the trial. The villain was Junko again. The twist that we were in a virtual world was like fine, but it wasn't anything incredibly interesting. The twist that we were remnants of despair, to me it didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything because I didn't know the characters before that, so like who cares, right? To me it's the same logic as finding out that we're remnants of despair. It's the same as if you watch a story unfold in its entirety and then the writer comes out at the end and tells you, oh yeah, the main character that you liked so much, before the whole story happened, they cheated on their girlfriend and went to prison for sexual assault. It would be like that. It would be like if they randomly came out and said, the character you like, they suck ass. What would that do, right? On the one hand, if you thought anything, you would think that sucks, right? If you thought anything, it would be that sucks. But more likely, you just thought nothing because you think, okay, well that wasn't in the story, so I don't care. That's not the character I knew, right? They're characters outside of the island, outside of the virtual world. I didn't care about. The tragedy subplot is so dumb. It is, yeah. And I think having Hajime be the villain, right? Have Hajime be Izuru Kamakura, that was just crap too. Like Izuru looks like shit. His character design is fucking trash. It's fucking awful. It's just Hajime with snake long hair. It's trash. The chapter 0 where we see him talking to Nagito, he's so fucking boring. He's the most boring character in the series. Just trash. Just a trash twist. This is mostly bad. I wish DR2 is just self-contained. It peaked so hard at case 5 and it nosedives. Yeah, I think fundamentally what goes wrong in the finale is that they try to tie it back to Danganronpa 1. But the problem is that Danganronpa 1, the overarching lore for Danganronpa 1, is already through the roof in scope, right? It's already... Danganronpa 1, Chapter 6, already takes the stakes and the scale of the story through the roof. So for Chapter 2-6 to tie into it, It needs to do that again. It needs to go through the roof again, right? They invent this ridiculous future foundation, right? They bring back Makoto. They have Junko again. They have Junko's like right hand man with is Izuru Kamakura. Yeah, they lobotomized him, which is just awful. It was just awful. I also think that every single ending for Danganronpa, every single case 6 suffers from this same problem, which is that the class trial for the finale, right, where we're talking about the outside world and we're trying to overthrow the game, the fact that it's contained to a class trial where the characters just stand in a circle and talk, it doesn't feel the same. It makes sense for the actual murders, where discussion is obviously the only weapon people have. But when we're overthrowing the game, I don't get why we just stand in a circle and talk. None of the chapter 6s solved that problem, right? So I don't really like the chapter 6s much. It's mainly because of the overarching story. I think the overarching story of Danganronpa is poor. It seems like a child writing a fanfic. It's really poor. If we remove all their memories of the characters, have the whole game about them working together for good, and reveal they are Hitler too before they are still bad. Are they still bad? Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying, right? It's like, if all your experiences with a character are good, and then you just get told that they're bad, are they still bad? That's why I like the V3 ending. It's like Kodaka just said, fuck it. V3 has the better ending, right? V3 is going to have a higher ending than the first 2 games, because V3 doesn't attempt to shove this overarching story down your throat as real, right? Like the whole tragedy, Hope's Peak Academy, all of that really high scope stuff. They don't do that in V3. And I think that's the worst part of Danganronpa. Would you apply that logic IRL? I think no. Right. In real world it's different. If somebody's nice to you and then it turns out they did something fucked up, you hold them accountable for it. But when it comes to a character, it's different, because characters aren't real. Somebody else is choosing to make them bad, you know? It's different. It's different than in the real world. If they have no memory of it, I mean, that's extremely philosophical. If Hitler was okay, imagine if instead of dying, Hitler was memory wiped, given a new personality, where he knew what he did, he hated it, he wanted to spend the rest of his life atoning for his sins, and he would never do it again, and he was really apologetic. Would you forgive him? Would you still kill him? Would you still imprison him? Like, what is he? Would you know what I mean, right? It's a philosophy question. But I don't think it applies to fiction. I think it's a lot simpler with fictional characters. It's just a bad writing move, right? It's just a bad writing move to make your characters be bad, but not framed as bad. Like, if you're gonna have them be main characters the whole time, and then still be good guys the whole time, but have done bad shit, and the writing doesn't frame it properly, then it's just bad writing, right? And to be fair, Danganronpa does this a lot. Danganronpa has a serial problem with this, where they just don't penalize bad behavior, right? Or outright evil behavior. The only thing that the characters seem to condemn is the killing game, and somebody who kills there and then in one of the chapters. They don't seem to condemn any evil, right? Toko in chapter 2 being outed as a serial killer is never condemned by the cast. Maki in V3 being an assassin with confirmed kills is never condemned by the cast. And then on some smaller scale stuff, they have things like Kaede, like, touches people against their will, right? Tenko is like a creepy stalker in a sexual way, and none of these things are condemned by the narrative at all. Does she have confirmed kills? I think so. I think they would have mentioned it if she'd never actually killed, right? I think she does. I think in the story she has had confirmed kills. She talked about what it was like after the first kill, and she said that you get used to it after a while. I feel like she has confirmed kills. Ryoma is another one, right? Ryoma in V3, it just confirmed murders people, and they never condemn it. It's really weird. It's really fucked up. Like I said, it kind of feels like it reads like a fanfic, right? Outside of the murders, the actual murders in the chapters and the cases to solve them, they feel like relatively mature writing, or at least guided by maturity. Whereas the overarching story and the characters' backstories, they feel like a 12-year-old's fanfic, right? You know, Toko having a split personality and going on an adventure with Makoto's sister, and they have a lesbian relationship during Ultra Despair Girls. That's a fanfic. That's a fucking fanfic. Maki V3 was condemned somewhat. You def had people on their guard. Yeah, people were on their guard, but nobody was condemning them. Like, imagine the real world, right? Imagine the real world, chat. How would you all feel if you found out that I, your favorite streamer, was a convicted murderer? Like, how would that change your opinion of me? Like, you know what I mean? It's supposed to be a massive deal. And the characters just don't do it. Peak tier list? Hello, Ellie. Anyway, I'm still rambling a bit, but Case 2-6, it's mostly bad, and I think most of the reason for it is just that. I can kind of see that you are trapped with them. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean I'm trapped? Yeah, most of the reason 2-6 is bad is just because I don't like the overarching story. I think it's really, really bad. Anyway, let's move on to V3 now. Chat, here's another really controversial. V3 is the most controversial game, to be honest. But 3-1, very controversial case. What do we think of 3-1? Hot take, bad case? I don't think that's a hot take. I think it's very divisive. I think there's a huge team on both sides, right? Some people want to put this case here. Some people want to put this case here. I'm curious where you guys think of 3-1. Screw that case. So this is the case where Kaede kills Rentaro, or at least tries to, and we believe she succeeds. And then she gets executed. It's because it's the first time that the author deliberately lied to the readers. So, why is that a bad thing? Also, when is the lie? What are you referring to? Are you referring to the advertisements, or are you referring to the in-text dialogue? She dropped everything and headed back? Yeah, so let me tell you, chat. I can guarantee this. There is no line in chapter 1 that contradicts the idea that Kaede is the killer. There is no line that outright lies to you. There is 0 lines that do that. Every line is consistent technically with her being the killer. Even her thoughts. There is no lines that outright lie to you. However, within reason, you would expect the killer to think about it. It's misleading, yeah. But there is no outright contradictory language, but there is it's weird. to say the least, right? It's weird to have the POV of a character who has done the murder investigate the murder and not let on that they are the murderer, right? It's weird for them to not have thoughts about it concretely that we can read. However, I seriously push back on the idea that this is a case ruining property. I seriously push back against that. Like, this barely moves the needle at all. The fact that we realistically should have had more thoughts from Kaede, it doesn't matter to me. This case is absolute cinema, right? The story of this case is incredible. I think it's detective mystery 101, right? A library, a hidden door, an ultimate detective, dust on the card reader, some expert deductions from Shuichi. It's a romance story between the two of them. It's Shuichi's arc where he's not very confident and then Kaede gives him the confidence to find the truth. The way that Shuichi's backstory is mirrored in the trial, where Shuichi felt bad about outing somebody because they turned out they kind of should have done what they did and they should have got away with it. It mirrors that in the actual trial where he has to overcome that challenge again. The actual trial where we figure out what the mechanics of the murder were good, right? The Rube Goldberg machine is actually kind of cool. The cameras, the hidden cameras are a mystery 101 thing, seeing the pictures. The fact that Rantaro is the murderer, that Rantaro is the murder victim, when he was set up to be this interesting character that might be like the Nagito of this game. Awesome twist, right? And then the fact that the only two characters that got the most development ended up being the killer as well, right? Like Shuichi or Kaede. The fact that they got all the focus, and then one of them was the killer too. That was also good writing, right? Because we didn't kill a nobody, we killed somebody that we care about. All of it points to a very, very good chapter. And I strongly push back on this idea that the POV switch ruins it. I don't think it takes much away from it at all. Because the actual story, if you were just watching it from like nobody's perspective, if you were just watching it from the outside, the story is awesome of chapter 3-1. It's a really good chapter. And it's really sad at the end of the trial. I have to agree with you, this case was my introduction to DR, and despite being taken aback by the protagonist being the killer, I genuinely found it really good. I like the idea, but the execution is bad, and it meant that the author could mislead the order in later chapters. So I have a few thoughts about that. First of all, I don't think this was a bad execution of the concept of the playable character is the killer, right? I don't think this is a bad execution of that at all, because they never outright lied. They did actually hint at it. And realistically, how are you gonna do it? If you're gonna have the POV character be the killer, how are you going to have it? Like, how? How are you supposed to do it other than this, right? You can't tell me with a straight face that it would have been better if Kaede said, right before the murder was revealed, imagine when we left the room, right? Imagine when we left the room and we rolled the shot into the vent. Imagine if the thought that came up at the bottom of the screen was, I rolled the shot put ball into the vent. Imagine if that's what came up, as was my plan all along. And then you discovered the body. How much suspense would that ruin? That would take away all the suspense. It would, as soon as you saw the shot put ball as the murder weapon, you would know exactly what happened, and you would have been like, what the fuck? It would have been worse. That's why it should have never been done. Yeah, that's realistically the only way to do it, right? Is to not do it at all. To just be Shuichi from frame 1. If we were Shuichi from frame 1, this case would have been basically identical, right? It would have been identical, because all of the things I praised it for would have still happened. and it would have just been slightly even better. It would have just been even slightly better. Also, given that Shuichi has the character arc in this chapter, I feel like being Shuichi from the start would have been better. Wouldn't everyone have died though? What do you mean? What do you mean? You mean because we got it wrong, right? Because we got it wrong, and Tsumugi was the killer? Is that what you're talking about? I thought it was based. I want to be misled. You deserve to be bamboozled. Genuinely, yes. Right? A mystery game. You want the narrative to throw red herrings at you and to throw like diversions at you. You want to be twisted. You want to have your mind blown. So it would have obviously been worse to just reveal that Kaede was the killer all along. This is a red whale. Since Kaede wasn't the real killer, Monokuma rule should have kicked in? Yeah, but it didn't. The reason why it didn't is because this is a show, and it's Murder 1, nobody would have accepted it. That's why Tsumugi cheated. Because she knew that Kaede tried to kill, but because it failed, she thought that was lame. We cannot have that. This is Danganronpa. We need to have that murder go through. So she did some behind-the-scenes trickery. Right? But that's the whole point. That's the whole point. I also gotta sing the praises of 3-1 again, because the fact that 3-6 retcons it to where, well, adds new information. The fact that 3-6 twists that first case again to where Tsumugi is the actual killer and mastermind. The fact that that happens, and it's not somehow leaving a hole in 3-1, is impressive. That's a very specific thing that I'm getting at here. So hopefully you see what I mean by that. But the fact that there is another twist about this case that we don't know yet, and there isn't very clearly a hole missing in the 3-1 chapter, the fact that it still feels satisfying and complete when it ends, is impressive writing. You gotta give it props for that. Because you could have very easily had the case not quite make sense, and then fill in that blank at the end, right? That would have made 3-6 more satisfying, but it would have made 3-1 a lot less satisfying. So this chapter is still really good. There should have been 2 group showers before Kaede died. This guy should have died instead of Kaede. What if someone just killed everyone, forcing the show to be over? I mean, Monokuma would step in because it's against the rules to kill more than 2. Anyway, chat. Here's my final take. It's absolute cinema. It's not as good as Nagito's case, but it's close. I do agree that the Kaede protagonist swap and the way that they slightly mislead you, it took away from this case a little bit. But it did offer a very good twist. Because imagine from the perspective, right? This is something that we haven't really considered. Imagine if you're Shuichi the whole time. Okay? Let's say you wake up, you're Shuichi. You're Shuichi the whole time. You're playing the 3rd installment of Danganronpa. The only character that is getting development is Kaede. The murderer, the murder victim, is what you thought was going to be the villain, but they died immediately. The only character who's getting developed is your love interest, Kaede. Isn't it really obvious that they're going to be the killer in this chapter 1? Don't you think it would be a lot more obvious than what we actually got, which was that we, the player, are the killer? So in a way, the protag swap, it wasn't taking away from it. It also added in more subverted expectations, because it took away what could have potentially been a very obvious killer. You see what I'm saying? If you were Shuichi the whole time, I know I would have, right? If I hadn't played this game before, after playing the first 2 games, I would have seen it coming a mile off, right? When we get to the trial, and the only character that we've spent any time with is Kaede, and we're playing as Shuichi, I know instantly she's the killer, right? If she's not the victim, she's gonna be the killer. right? Like, that's just so obvious. So I think the Protect swap actually protected you from that obvious twist. There was a theme of stopping the killing game by killing, and that kind of spits in its face. No, that... You do this a lot, Catboy. I mean, we have a lot of different opinions where you notice something, and then you think it's a bad thing. But when I notice that same thing, I think it's a good thing. Right? Don't you think it was a good thing? I think it was a cool theme, right? That everybody tried to stop the killing game by killing. Everybody tried to stop the killing game by doing a plan that involved killing. Until the very end, when Shuichi had a plan that did not involve killing. Right? It involved outing the mastermind for cheating. I know I like that it didn't work. Yeah, okay. Anyway, let's move on to 3-2. Let's move on to 3-2. What do we think of 3-2? Minecraft stream? Yeah, I promise this is a Minecraft stream. But we are just doing a TLS right now. Kaeli also didn't kill in the end? Yes, but I think that makes 3-1 better. Right, I don't think 3-1 is ruined by 3-6, because they're separated by so much stuff. This is such a complete story in its own. I don't think the twist in 3-6 takes away from 3-1 at all. Moving on to 3-2. 3-2, this is Kirumi killing Ryoma, and zip lining across the pool, and interrupting Himiko's magic show. Right, the piranhas eating eating Ryoma. What do we think of this one? This is where the death bath of old bodies began. I am pro ziplines, but this sucked. Mid. I agree. I don't think this is... I think this is in the middle somewhere. It's either solid or some good, some bad, but I'm pretty sure it's solid. I think it's worse than 1-1. But it could be better than 1-1. It's hard to say, right? Because the conundrum that I'm having here is that I think per 10 minutes, right? If you separate if you cut the chapter into 10-minute segments, I think per 10 minutes, chapter 1 is more entertaining and has solider writing than chapter 3-2 does. But chapter 3-2 is a lot longer than 1-1, right? 1-1 is the shortest chapter in the series, and 3-2 is one of the longest chapters in the series. It's hard to say that there isn't more to enjoy in this case because it's just so much bigger. So I think it does go a bit higher, but I think in terms of the overall quality, like the density of the quality, it is slightly worse. Because I think there's a bit of superfluous stuff in here, but I do think it's solid. There isn't anything terrible about this, but there's also nothing incredible, right? It's kind of just a solid case. It's a little overcomplicated. The murder plan is like slightly ridiculous, right? Like they drown him in his lab, but then they zipline over to the gym to put the body in the piranha tank. For what purpose, right? Just to frame Himiko? Just to frame Himiko? Like that feels... Imagine doing that in real life, right? Would you go through all that effort to frame somebody? I feel like you wouldn't, right? Also, I lazy? Yeah, it was a bit superfluous. I liked Himiko's magic show. I thought Himiko's magic show was a cool pre-murder section, right? Like, the pre-murder stuff was kind of fun, but I feel like in this chapter it was really long. this was one of the longest pre-murder sections, and it was kinda long, right? We had the motive video motive, and the conflict that caused. We had the insect meet and greet, where Kokichi trapped us in Gonta's lab, and then we had the magic show as well. I feel like there was just slightly too much going on before the murder, and in the end, I was a bit bored before. I hate to say it, but right, I was really hoping that the murder would come a bit sooner during the pre-murder section of this one. I think it just took a bit too long to get there. And then the actual trial itself was also kind of long. Going to work, but I do think 3-2 was mid. Ryoma as a character ended up being more interesting than the case itself. Ryoma got more interesting after he died, just finding out more about him. Yes. Kirumi... So, I hate what they did to Kirumi. I think Kirumi being the secret president was just a silly twist. It makes perfect sense knowing what you know with 3-6, right? Like, it makes perfect sense that since the flashback lights are fake and our characters are fake, our memories are fake, it makes sense that there would be ridiculous things. And in a way, I do believe that V3 characters were written to be more extreme on purpose as a hint at this, right? I think the reason why our backstories are so batshit crazy compared to the more grounded first two games was a hint that, you know, it's all fake. That's why Gonta was raised by wolves. That's why Kirumi was the fucking president. That's why Kyo was the craziest psycho murderer you've ever seen. Right? You get what I'm saying? But I didn't like it at the time. It was kind of a lackluster twist that she was the president and needed to escape, because that just felt so unpersonal, right? Like, this is a character-driven game with a closed cast of 16 characters. Like, quite frankly, I did not give two shits about her backstory with the president and being responsible for the lives of a nation. I did not give two shits, because I'm here for the characters that are on the screen, not the ones that are not on the screen. So this was solid though, because nothing ruined it. There was no detail in this case that was like mega bad, and there was nothing that went above and beyond. This just felt solid. Yeah, sure. 3-3. Case 3-3. This is Kyo. Grounded first two games, Genocide Jack and Ultimate Breeder. I mean, they're not grounded by any stretch of the imagination, but they're more grounded. Right? A high schooler being the best at breeding animals is more believable than a high schooler secretly being a superhero running the country. Right? 3-3 is Kyo's case. This is Tenko's murder and Anji's murder. What did we think of this chapter, chat? Me personally, I think, so everybody in the fandom sort of has this idea that chapter 3 is the worst case in every single game, and I do agree. Look at this. 1-3 and 2-3 are the bottom ones, and I think this is the worst case in V3 as well, but it is the best 3. Yeah, it is the best of the 3s, but I think it's still either, I think it's this. It's still on the lower end, but I think it's this, right? I think it's some good, some bad. I don't think it's this. I don't think it's low. I don't actually think it's this low at all. I think it's some good, some bad, because do I do my own character tier list? If you want to. I think it's this, right? I think it's some good, some bad. As much as there are some bad parts, and I really dislike the bad parts, I can't deny I like some of the good parts. It could be this, it could be mostly bad, but like I'll be totally honest. If I had to, like, if I think about being forced into a room, if I was locked in a basement and forced to play through a chapter of Danganronpa straight, and then that's how, and I couldn't get out until I finished it, which one would I have the worst time playing through at any given time? It's not this one. Like, this one's not that close to the bottom of the list, because there are things that I would look forward to in this case. What I like about this, I like the seance. I think the seance was cool. The way that we did that sneaky little seance to try and talk to Angie. And there was all those occult, like, features with the cage and the song and the darkness. That was cool and based. Finding Tenko dead underneath the cage was cool. I do think that was cool. Angie's death was nice too. I mean, I don't agree. I don't agree that Angie's death was nice. Angie was annoying, and I was happy to see her go, but it's not like her death really served the story. It just saved us from bullshit. It didn't really it didn't really do anything narratively cool. She just died. The cult thing with Angie before the murders, that was kind of shit. I don't think that was the best representation of a cult, and it was a little bit childish, right? Like like Angie got people into her cult for seemingly no reason. The characters in this chapter were very shallow, right? Like who did Angie trick into her cult? Gonta. Why did Gonta get tricked? Because Angie just asked him to. Himiko, why did Himiko get tricked? For no reason, because Angie just said Himiko, just told Himiko that Atua was hot. Samugi got tricked because, joke's on you, she's the mastermind, she didn't actually get tricked, she's just playing along. And that's it, right? Like, the cult was kind of shit. And it didn't really play a role. It didn't play a role in who the murderers was, like who the killer was. Like the motive for the murder, I should say. The cult did not matter, right? Kyo did not kill Angie because Angie was running a cult. Kyo killed Angie just because he wanted to. So there was some bad parts, right? The motive for the murder was really ass. I think Kyo killing anyone just because he's a murderer, just because that's his identity, was really ass. That was really bad. And I think probably the elephant in the room for this chapter is how obvious it is that Kyo's the killer. Right? Especially for the murder of Tenko. Right? The murder of Tenko is just really obviously Kyo. I think, like, he's the obvious suspect from the start. So, okay, let me explain a concept to you guys. See if you know what I'm trying to say. Do you know what I said? Do you know what I mean if I said there is, in most like murder mysteries, there is immediately the obvious suspect. Let's call them the obvious suspect, just via a natural, intuitive understanding of the environment, right? Like if you were there in real life, if it was real, who would you suspect? There is the obvious suspect. How the writing frames that obvious suspect can be one of many things, right? Like they can either immediately lean into it, which makes you, the experienced viewer, think, okay, it's the red herring, or they can not address it at all, which makes you keep it in the back of your mind as, okay, it's probably them, but until I see better evidence, I'll keep playing, right? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Right? Like there's the obvious suspect based on the immediate intuition, and then you have to see how the narrative frames them. And if they don't address them, if the narrative isn't leading towards the obvious suspect, then you believe that they're going to be the suspect more, right? You believe that they're going to be the actual culprit. And if they end up being the actual culprit, you're like, okay, they were the obvious suspect, so it wasn't that surprising. Do you understand what I'm saying? Kyo was that, right? Kyo was the obvious suspect. The narrative did not put any pressure on him as the suspect immediately, right? Danganronpa does this a lot, where somebody is obviously tangentially related to the context of the murder, and therefore, as soon as the trial starts, people start suspecting them immediately. It's usually the dumb characters, and then we move past it after a few minigames, right? Like that's pretty much what happens in Danganronpa. The fact that Kyo was not the prime suspect immediately just sort of left this sinking feeling in my stomach when I played it, like, oh my god, he's just the killer, isn't he? He's just gonna be the killer. And then part of me held out hope that when the reveal happened that he killed Tenko, when it came out that he might not have killed Angie, and it was like, okay, I didn't actually kill Angie though, so I'm not the Blackened. That I thought was going to be a cool twist. When that happened on my first playthrough, I was like, now I get it. Now I get why we had an obvious culprit that was relatively easily found out. Now I get it, because it's not going to be him who killed Angie. And then it just turned out to be him who killed Angie too, which was kind of a disappointment. I was so ready to experience somebody else being the killer of Angie, and then Kyo surviving. I was so ready for that. I thought that would have been really cool to see. But it didn't happen, so big disappointment. I think it's either here, mostly bad, or it's up here. My favorite thing about this case, actually, now that I think about it, my favorite thing about this case was the theme. They had this running through line of... So there was two themes to this chapter, right? There was the superficial theme of just spookiness and the occult, right? We had the new floor open up, which had like spooky themes, blood on the walls, that new music that was really like spooky. It was obviously spooky themed, right? We had anthropology had spooky stuff in it. Angie started a cult, which is very occult-like stuff. The motive was a resurrection ritual. It was obviously like superficially occult themed, but then there was this like hidden more metaphorical theme, which was the theme of what am I trying to say? It's the dead. Is the dead affecting the living? It's the impact that the deceased have on those still alive. That was a theme throughout this chapter, right? Like, Shuichi was feeling the effect of Kaede, right? Kaito kept saying those lines about how we shouldn't care about the dead, don't let them control you or whatever, like, live for who's alive. And then in the end, the killer, Kyo, killed for the same reason, right? He was influenced by somebody who's already dead. That was his motive for killing. So I did like that through line, and Himiko as well. Tenko died for Himiko, and then how that affected Himiko throughout the rest of the chapter, and then how she like got emotional and developed at the end of the chapter. That was good stuff. That was my favorite thing about this chapter by far. So some good, some bad. I think that's fair. Is it better than these? I don't know if it's better than these. Honestly, it might be. Is it crazy if I say it's better than all of these? Would this be crazy to put 3-3 here? Better than 2-4? I mean, maybe. Like, ironically, if I had to play a case again right now, would I rather play this one or this one? I feel like this one's pretty good compared to this. It might be here. It might go here. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it here. Anyway, I finished the tier list I sent you. I'll look at it later. Anyway, chat. Are we still alive? 3-4. 3-4. What do we think of 3-4? This is Gonta killing Mew. Barely. I apologize, Mew. I'm alive. Good job. Boo. Yeah, so saddest trial. This one ripped me apart. What do you mean by that, Moon? You mean emotionally it hurt? Because of Gonta? I think I sort of hate virtual reality killings in general. Me too. Me too. So yeah, I think I'm gonna break the trend. Unironically. I don't know. I'm gonna break the trend. I think every single person in the fandom for Danganronpa unanimously agrees that the worst cases in every game are the third one. But I think I'm gonna break that. I think this is worse than 3-3. Right? I think this is worse because honestly, it might even be here. It might even be here. Because let me say all the things I don't like first. I don't like the virtual world. Okay? I don't like the existence of the virtual world. I think that was bad. Conceptually, and also the execution. Conceptually, I think it's bad because it's just needlessly complicated. Why is there a virtual world room in this academy? Why does that exist? I feel like that was unnecessary. It was just superfluous. I don't really have any good logic for why that is a bad thing. I just personally don't like it. But then the execution of the virtual world was pretty bad. I think the sprites were cute, but the virtual world itself was really underwhelming. It was just 2 buildings and a path between them. Like really small, really underwhelming. And there was literally nothing there. There was nothing in the virtual world. It only existed to be a setting for the murder. Right? There was nothing in there. So it felt really unnatural because it's not like there was a secret to find. I know Monokuma put a secret in there. He said the secret of the outside world was in there, but that doesn't count. That doesn't count. Genuinely, it doesn't count. There was just nothing in there. Like, if you think about the fact that a building has rooms in it, seemingly for a reason, the fact that the murders just take place in the new areas is like supposed to just be a coincidence in Danganronpa. Like the murders can take place anywhere. Why does the virtual world exist? All of the rooms serve a purpose. The virtual world does not serve a purpose. There's nothing in it. So I think it was lame and lazy, and there was nothing to it other than being a setting for the murder. So I didn't like the virtual world. I feel like it was 2 good characters acting on a character. I feel like Gonta not knowing he did it is a huge negative. Gonta getting tricked into it or doing it to protect someone would have been much better. Also, what's the point of VR without porn? It's Miyu's reason for wanting to kill Kokichi was so wishy-washy. Yes. So beyond the virtual world being bad, there are some other things I don't like about this chapter, which is, first of all, Miyu. The way Miyu acts, like the fact that Miyu is planning a kill. I can buy it. Genuinely, I feel like it's not out of character for Miyu to try to kill someone after finding out about the virtual world. Like, Miyu is not that smart. She's good with her inventions, but she's technically smart. but she's not like wise. She's not that intelligent, like in a worldly way. So upon finding out about the virtual world, I can believe that Miu saw an opportunity to kill. Right? I can believe that because genuinely, the virtual world is a pretty easy win if you find it and you're Miu. Nobody else has any expertise. You don't have to tell them anything. You can modify it. You have no knowledge that they're ever going to find out, right? You have no reason to believe that Monotaro is going to randomly tell them what happened on the computer, right? You believe that nobody else is going to understand this thing. They have no idea that you can die in here. So I'm going to kill someone in here. And then that's it. They'll be stuck thinking that it happened in the real world. And that's it. I can frame Kaito. I genuinely can believe Miu did that. She assumed he was the mastermind also? No, she didn't. I don't think she assumed Kokichi was the mastermind. I'm pretty sure she just killed Kokichi because he's a bitch. I'm pretty sure that's all it is. She just picked the bitch. Whoops, my hand slipped? Yes. The whoops, my hand slipped is awful. Why she made herself so obviously suspicious when she did that was beyond me. However, right, I said that it's believable Miu can concoct a murder upon finding the virtual world. However, knowing what she can create in Chapter 5, and knowing what she clearly, if you think about it, already had made, she has to have, right? Before she died, she has to have already made a remote control for the Exisals, electro hammers, and electro bombs, and somehow still decides to do the murder. That is what I can't really get my head around. I feel like, given the power of what she made them for the guy she was going to kill. Yes, that also is a really weird thing. It feels like it makes no sense. Didn't he say he was a master of despair before that? No. That was Chapter 5. He pretended to be the mastermind in Chapter 5. Yeah, it doesn't make sense that she would make those things for Kokichi of all people, but also just make them in general. Like, those things are such good weapons. They are so good that, like, what do you mean she's not gonna make those and think about escaping with it? Right? You're telling me that it didn't cross her mind to try the tunnel, it didn't cross her mind to fight an Exisal, it didn't cross her mind to bring it up with anybody. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It just does not make sense. So, yeah, I can agree that Miu acted out of character. And then we come to Gonta. Gonta being tricked by Kokichi into murdering Miu is so much better of a concept than what really happened, that most people still think that that is what happened. Right? Like, when you ask people about this chapter, they think that that's what happened, and it just isn't, right? Gonta decided to murder Miu on his own. Like, and apparently it was because the outside world was so bad that we should just die instead. So he decides to kill one person, seemingly, right? And then his plan was what? To escape a class trial by killing everyone? It's more believable that he got tricked into it. Exactly, right? It's so much more believable and so much more natural, considering Kokichi's role in it anyway, that you have to ask why that wasn't the case, right? Like, I think the reason why why they did that is because they wanted Gonta's motive to be a hint for the next chapter, right? They wanted it to be like an overarching narrative hint right? About the outside world being destroyed and so bad, so full of despair, right? They wanted that kind of cliffhanger. But for me, somebody who doesn't care about the overarching narrative that much, that was a big L for me, because I don't give a shit what the outside world is. I want my character who murders somebody to have a good, believable motive, right? I want my murder mystery to be good. So this should have been Kokichi tricking him, right? And the thing is, it's a virtual world, right? It's a virtual world. So there could have been, you can think of infinite options how Kokichi can make Miyu die through Gonta being the Blackened without Gonta realizing it, right? Not only is it a virtual world, but also Gonta's dumb as hell. How the hell is that hard to write, right? It's not hard to write. You could come up with any number of opportunities, or of options, I should say, for how Gonta could be the Blackened against Miyu without realizing it, right? That way, he's the Blackened. Throughout the trial, he doesn't know he's the Blackened, and we only piece it together once we realize how Miyu died, and that's when Gonta can start adding in, like, wait, I did that, right? He didn't know you could kill someone in the game? Exactly, right? It could have been anything. It could have been Kokichi puts Miyu in a box and Gonta pushes the box off the cliff, right? It could have been anything. It could have been literally anything. It doesn't make any sense why that couldn't have been the case. It should have been the case. It would have been so much better if Kokichi tricked Gonta into doing the murder. And then Gonta, like, can you imagine how much sadder it would have been? It was already really sad. And when I get to the positives about this chapter, I'm going to talk about how sad the trial was. But it would have been even more sad and, like, better. Can you imagine if he didn't forget his time in the virtual world? He knew exactly what he did, but he just didn't realize that what he did was relevant to the murder. So he didn't bring it up. He thought he was innocent. And then by the time that we figure out how Miyu died, we realize, like, Gonta realizes himself. He's like, wait, I did that. And there's this really awful moment where Gonta is, like, pseudo-confessing, right? Like, that would be so tragic, right? Like, he's confessing to the murder, but doesn't realize that he's confessing to the murder, and everybody's listening to him like, holy shit, it's you. And he doesn't realize, he's clueless. That would be, it's like a Lenny look at the flowers moment, right? Like, it would be so sad, and that would be awesome. Yeah, imagine if he would have lost, but then he realizes it and saves us. Yes, exactly, right? He realizes, wait a sec, guys, I did that, right? And you know what's so good about that option? It fits the pattern, right? What is chapter 4 about in every single game? It's about self-sacrifice, right? 1-4, Sakura, the big character, sacrifices themselves. In chapter 2-4, Nekomaru, the big character, just like Gundam, sacrifices himself. And then in case 3-4, it would have been that. It would have been, in the trial, Gonta realizes that he's the killer and sacrifices himself. It would have fit the pattern. It would have been so much better. And it would have even made Kokichi out to be even more of a villain, because he actually did force the murder. Like, he is 100% to blame for it. So it would have been such a better chapter. It would have been up here. It would have been this. Well, maybe not actually, because the virtual world still sucked. So it might have still been like this, right? But it would, that part would have been so good. But because that didn't happen, it's kind of just mostly bad. And then the last thing to say about this is the good parts. The reason it's not needs a lot of work, even though it does need a lot of work, it does have some redeeming qualities, which is the trial. The trial is good. Kokichi is really entertaining in the trial. it's really sad when we realize Gonta's the culprit. That moment where he tells us that he holds his chopsticks in the other hand, right? And we realize that he's forgotten. That was so sad. And the voice acting on Kokichi in the trial is like awesome. That part is the selling point for 3-4 for me. Okay. Next up. 3-5. What are our opinions on 3-5? I'm curious about this one. I'm really curious what we think of 3-5. I'm not personally a big fan of 3-5. Why? What don't you like about it? I really like Kokichi recognizing Shuichi as a rival in Chapter 4. Does he do that? I don't know if that's super clear or not. He taunts Shuichi a lot. But I think he's always sort of recognized him as a rival. 3-4 being so ass holds it back? What do you mean? You mean all of 3? You mean it holds back 3-5? Oh, you mean it holds back 3-5? Why? Kind of relies on Shuichi just believing something he has no real reason to believe, just so the trial can work. Also, how in God's name did Kokichi write an entire book on impersonating him? Shuichi being stupid, but probably still the second best. Yeah. So here's the thing. This is getting into what I mentioned before we even started the tier list about my general philosophy on like judging writing. I find it difficult, and I know this might sound hypocritical considering how I've rated the rest of them, but I find it hard to let the bad parts take away from the good parts for me, which is why this category exists, to be honest. Right? Like, something isn't bad if it has some good parts. It's some good and some bad. I like acknowledging that. I get it, especially with DR. Yeah, because I mean, it takes, realistically, if you're voicing all the lines like I did on stream and interacting with chat, like each chapter took up to like 9 hours to play, right? 9 hours of content for one chapter. It's impossible to ruin it with like one plot point, you know? So I don't like putting things low because of individual things. This is a cinema chapter, right? This is my opinion. This is cinema. This is behind 3-1, but it's very close. On my original playthrough, like way back when I first discovered Danganronpa, I remember I used to put it here. This used to be my favorite. Now that I've played through it again, I feel a bit tamer about it. I think it goes here, but it's still one of the best. Here's why I like 3-5 so much. First of all, the obvious stuff is that the trial is just absolutely batshit crazy, right? There are so many moving parts and twists and turns in the trial. It's just lively as hell. It's really entertaining. I think my favorite scene in the whole series is in this chapter, right? My favorite scene in the whole series is in this chapter, which is the body discovery of Kokichi, right? That's my favorite scene in the whole game. I really, really love how Chapter 5 has this... It seems to have this objective, right? In the pre-murder section of Chapter 5, the writing seems to be doing everything it possibly can to make you, the viewer, believe that this is not going to be a regular chapter with a murder and a trial. It does everything in its power to make you believe that that's not gonna happen, right? It starts by, having Kaito's plan to end the killing game, right? And we agree on it by getting all of the stuff. It goes into, we get the equipment and we go through the tunnel, right? We go through the tunnel, and then, you know, the tunnel is a callback to chapter 1, right? This is the escape route, and we complete it. We get to the end of the tunnel, we think like, oh my god, we're in the end game, right? Like we're doing crazy stuff now. We're taking down the killing game. Then we see the outside world, which is not normally a thing we get until chapter 6. We know the mastermind is, right? Kokichi reveals he's the mastermind, tells us the whole story. That's not something we get until chapter 6. Then we get super depressed and we stop doing free time and normal interactions. Then we get the Hope's Peak Academy flashback light, right? And it starts playing the main theme of the game in the regular interactions, right? We get all of the Hope's Peak stuff. Everything I've just listed is, I mean, I'm just telling you the story of chapter 5, but everything I've listed is pushing the reader towards believing that this is not a normal trial, that this is not going to be a normal chapter with a murder. So when we storm the hangar, right, it is perfectly reasonable that even this far into the game, the viewer could believe, the player that could believe, that we are not just going to discover a body right now. Monokuma disappearing as well, I forgot to mention that. Monokuma disappearing, yeah, I know, exactly, an odd encounter. When you read out chapter 5's plot, it feels like a chapter 6 plot. It's intentional, right? Monokuma disappears as well, and that's why it hits so hard when you realize at the end of the pre-murder, right before the investigation, that it is just a normal fucking chapter, right? When we discover Kokichi's body and we get that artwork of Shuichi standing there, we get the body discovery announcement, and then Monokuma starts laughing. That is my favorite scene in the whole game for this exact reason. It's because the whole chapter makes you believe that it's not going to just be a normal murder, and then it is, right? Kokichi's not the mastermind. A body discovery happened. Monokuma's perfectly fine. The characters discover the body, and now they got to do a normal class trial. So as good as that is, it's not even the meat and potatoes, right? It's not even the murder, the investigation, and the trial. It's the pre-murder, right? All of what I just said is the pre-murder. No other chapter has anywhere close to as engaging of a pre-murder than this one. And then the actual trial is sick as hell, right? Not only is there the bait and switch, that the killing game is going to continue like normal, but then the actual trial is badass as hell. We got the Exisol thing, we don't even know who the victim is, which is the craziest gimmick you could ever have in a Danganronpa case, right? You don't even know who the victim is. I genuinely thought we wouldn't find a body. Yeah, exactly, right? It's it does it on purpose. So that's why I love this case. The fact that Kaito is also, I mean, this sort of goes without saying, but the fact that Kokichi, the main villain of the cast, and Kaito, the main deuteragonist of the cast, are the killer and victim here, also elevates it, right? Because those are the characters that we care about the most. So them being the main characters of this case matters. So yeah, this is S tier case, in my opinion. The things that hold it back, the things that could have been better, is number one, like somebody mentioned, it's a bit unrealistic to think that Kaito, with the intellect that he seemingly has, could act like Kokichi for the whole trial. That is a bit of a stretch. Even with the book, it's a stretch. And the other thing that holds it back is Shuichi has no reason to help Monokuma over Kokichi and Kaito. He has no good reason to believe that he should help Monokuma, right? As soon as he figured out what was going on, he should have, like, as soon as he realized that Monokuma did not know who the culprit was, he should have realized immediately. Like, given Shuichi's intelligence in the rest of the game, he should have immediately come up with an idea, right? Like, that should not have gone over his head like it did in the chapter. The fact that Monokuma doesn't know who the culprit is, Shuichi should have jumped on that immediately, right? He should have done something about that. Kaito reads a book for like 3 hours and gives an Oscar-worthy performance. Yeah. But yeah, overall, this chapter is crazy. There is one other thing that I guess I could criticize it for, but it's kind of just a personal opinion, which is I kind of wish Kokichi won, right? I think in a way, Kokichi should have won. Like, here's what should have happened. This case is nearly perfect. I love this case. I don't think it needs to change, but if I was to rewrite it, I would have them somehow both be in the Exisal, right? I would have nobody die, right? Like, let's say Kokichi like cuts off his arm or something, and that's where all the blood came from. Or they both like cut off their arm or something, right? But nobody died, and they actually did successfully fool Shuichi and Monokuma, so Kokichi's plan worked. I kind of wanted that extra twist. And then let's say at the end of the trial, they think that they've overthrown the game, they think that they've won, and then Monokuma is just like, nope, you don't win, executes them both. And then they carry on to chapter 6 or something. I don't know. But like, I kind of wanted that one extra twist. I wanted Shuichi to lose, realistically. I wanted the plan to work. I think that would have been slightly better. But it might have been worse in some other ways. I'm not sure how to do that. But yeah, sick chapter. And then the last case, 3-6. This is probably the most divisive chapter in the series. Like, some people are like F tier, trash tier. Some people are like, this is sick. What do we think of 3-6, chat? Good or bad? I'm gonna put it in solid for now, but I have a better opinion. I'm not putting it in solid, but where do we think this goes? Even at its worst, I think it's better than a lot of the bad chapters. Yes. I mean, I think if your opinion of 3-6 is that it's here, below every other chapter in the series, I think you're a bit biased, right? You're at least focusing too much on the concept instead of looking at every part of it. I think if you think it's the worst, you gotta be focusing on something. You gotta be tunnel visioning, I think. Because this is actually a good chapter, in my opinion. Personally, I love 3-6. Some good, some bad, bit too long, needed a better end cast. Terrible MM? What do you mean by MM? Oh, Mastermind. Right, yeah, so criticizing 3-6 first. Let me put it in solid for a start. Really good. Hello, Zoa. So I'll start with the bad parts of 3-6. I agree with Catboy that it went on too long. Yesterday's stream was like 9 hours, right? I believe it was like 9 hours or something for an investigation and a trial. I do completely get why it's the longest investigation and the longest trial. Absolutely needed to be. But I think parts of it were a bit too long. In the middle, right, when we were bridging the gap, after we solved Samugi's the mastermind and she's the one who murdered Rentaro, after we solved that, the middle ground where she was just explaining what was going on and what Danganronpa really was, that felt like it was talking in circles. Yeah, exactly, Neuro. It talked in circles a little bit. Like, Tsumugi had a lot of lines that were the same line in spirit, but just the same line again, right? It could have been cut, yeah. It could have been, you could have cut out some of the middle parts and got quicker to the like Kibo stuff where we fight the outside world, right? You could have cut some of the middle repetition. I feel like the reason they repeated it in circles a lot is because they knew it was complicated and they were worried that the readers would misunderstand what was happening. I think they might have been worried that it I think they might have been worried that we would mistake it for a fourth wall break when it wasn't quite a fourth wall break, right? Like the fact that they kept saying Danganronpa, if you're not really paying attention, you might think they're breaking the fourth wall, but they're not really doing that. So I think they were worried that people were going to misunderstand it, and that's why they talked in circles a bit. Also, I needed a song battle with the Mastermind. Yeah, true. Actually, we never did a rhythm battle against Tsumugi. You know, and a real execution, perhaps. I don't think we need an execution because the executions they've been neither here nor there for me. Kokichi is responsible for so much death, and I was really hoping there was a good reason for it. He was responsible for Gonta and Miyu, and he said in chapter 5 to Kaito that he did that in order to make you believe he was the mastermind, which, it's an explanation. I don't know if it's a satisfying explanation or not. It feels like it feels like not, because Kokichi being a good guy in the end, right? Wanting to end the killing game and help us out is sort of nullified completely by the fact that he did kill Gonta. He did kill Miyu. Right? Like, that's a seriously bad act. You know, so the fact that he was a good guy in the end was sort of rendered mute a little bit. Yeah. Kaito himself was somewhat avoidable. I liked Kokichi's plan, right? In case 3-5, I liked Kokichi's plan a lot. I think it was a good plan. It was, if anyone ruined it, it's Shuichi that ruined it. The plan was genuinely solid. But yeah, back to 3-6. I like 3-6. I think putting this in a different universe than the original two Danganronpa games, and having those original Danganronpa games be fiction within this world, and that this world is like copying that fiction and turning it into this like grand corporate stuff, was a cool twist. I liked that, right? This is a better twist, a better ending than the first games, because I think that the scope of the first games is actually larger, right? Because this is more believable. The fact that we have like a Colosseum Gladiator-esque modern killing game that people like, you know, kind of like Squid Games, that is a more believable premise than the tragedy and Junko taking over the world, right? That's a more believable, that's a smaller scope. I like that. I think this was a better ending than the first two games, so it's definitely higher than these two. I wish you would get to see more of the corporization of the game. Yeah, so what do you mean by the corporization of the game? Because something about V3 that I think goes over a lot of people's heads is how a lot of the choices throughout the whole game are actually like a hint at the twist, right? The fact that everything is a reference is a hint at it. The fact that the characters are so over the top, right? The fact that the backstory is so over the top, like meteorites, virus, space arcs, right? The fact that Gonta was raised by wolves, the fact that Kirumi's secretly the president. These are over the top plot lines that you would expect from like the 53rd season of something, right? Because they've had to go so far to top the previous ones. That was sort of intentional in the writing. It didn't make the characters any less annoying. You're absolutely right. The fact that it was intentional to make the twist more contextualized doesn't do anything to remedy the previous 5 chapters where you thought that they were genuine. Absolutely. Do you think DR7 is FF7 or DR franchise in unknown? In universe? What do you mean? I don't know what... I haven't played Final Fantasy. The post-credit has you ask what's true too. It does seem a little like DR1 and 2 are real. Yeah, so the post-credit scene is sort of the send-off for the theme of the game. The theme of Danganronpa V3 isn't hope and despair, it's truth and lies, right? That's the theme of the game. And they sort of throw it at you, their final thesis at the end, where they're like, does it actually matter what's true and what isn't? What's canon and what isn't? Does it actually matter? As long as the story was good, then it's alright, right? That's sort of the thesis at the end. I believe that's what they were trying to say. They do offer like an open ending where they're like, they say basically Samugi could have lied because one of the things that was not addressed was, remember in the very ending when we had a flashback to the prologue, right? And during the prologue where we didn't have our ultimate memory, we were just normal people. But during the flashback, it was different than what we actually saw in the prologue. In the prologue, none of us were excited about being in the killing game. We didn't recognize that it was a killing game. But when we flashed back to it in the last chapter, those lines were added in to make us seem excited. So it begs the question of whether actually Samugi made up the outside world as well, right? Was the outside world where we applied to enter the game, was that also a lie, right? It leaves the question open-ended. D3 was also made out of spite. I think that's an embellishment, Shaunosaurus. I think that's an embellishment. It's like a tale told by the fans. I don't think it was made out of spite, right? Like, I've heard this story before, right? I've heard the story that the writers pressured, the corporate was pressuring the writers to make more and more Danganronpa because that's what corporations do, right? The first 2 made a lot of money, so corporate, what do? They say, make one every year, go, pump them out, make Slopification, go, 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 go. Make Gonta Raised by Wolves, fuck it, go, go, go. Make 53 of those fuckers. And that they were parodying that in the game, right, as sort of a spiteful ending, and then they broke up and stopped writing Danganronpa. That's a tinfoil hat theory. Yeah, it is. I've heard that theory before. I don't think it's true. But it's certainly a nice message, right? Like, I really like the parody of the slopification of franchises. I think it's a nice twist because it's something that is real. It's not just an in-universe twist. It actually adds like a philosophical twist, you know? There's some juice to it with the meta commentary. Exactly, right? The meta commentary is there, but I think it's there just because the writers are intelligent, right? The writers are intelligent and they made a banger idea to do a meta commentary on it. But I think that was always the plan, right? I don't think they were gonna make a normal game and then they decided to like spite corporate. I think it's good. I think it's cinema. It might not be cinema, it might be above and beyond, but it's above and beyond for sure, because it's this or higher, because the twists in 3.6 did not need to be there, right? They, solving the real mastermind is Samugi. and that she's the one who killed Rentaro. That was solid. That would have been solid. And then, you know, an extra twist was expected because it's the end of the game. Why is the mastermind doing what they're doing? Explain it. Give me something. Sure. We needed that. But what they actually went for was definitely above and beyond. They did not need to flesh out that idea the way that they did. So for me, it's either here or it's cinema. Right? I think I'm going to put it here because if I do think about it, it has some drawbacks. I think the middle section of the trial dragged on a lot. I think the very end of the trial suffered from the problem I mentioned with the first two games, which was, why are these characters standing in a circle and talking at this point? Why aren't they just doing whatever the fuck they like, right? Why aren't they just jumping around, killing people, killing Samugi? Why aren't they doing whatever the fuck they like? So there was some drawbacks to it, but I like it. I wish they gave him a personality throughout the game. Yes. I wish Samugi played a role in the relationships of the characters. I don't mind her not playing a role in the murders, right? Obviously she's not going to be a killer or a victim, but obviously that, like, she could have been involved in, like, you know, she could have been a prime suspect, she could have been framed, she could have like played a role. I like the fact that she didn't, because it sort of makes sense for a mastermind within the game to just, like, not interfere too much. It makes sense. But I think from a relationship perspective, she should have got involved more. Yeah, she could have talked. She could have made friends, gotten involved, and then been the mastermind. They could have done more with her not seeing everyone around her as real people. Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. Right? Samugi knows the whole time that the people she's talking to are not real. And that she made them. Right? If you think about it, if she's to be believed, she wrote the personalities and backstories for these characters. And she's now engaging with them. I feel like there could have been a way to draw that out, you know, in the dialogue. She was a bit too obvious, being totally useless. Was she obvious, Zoa? Like, did you? When did you know Samugi was the mastermind, or when did you majorly suspect her to be the mastermind? Right? Like, I'm pretty sure everybody figures it out in chapter 6 before the reveal. But like, when before that did you figure out that she's probably the mastermind? Because I don't think it was, like, super obvious. Is the Minecraft gameplay still happening? It will happen, yeah. I'm kind of... Honestly, it might not happen. I'm sorry. It might not happen because this is taking forever. I have a lot to talk about, right? I'm a yapper. You've seen the length of my branded guides. During the case where she was a suspect... You mean chapter 1? You mean chapter 1? I didn't think they would actually do it. Do you mean chapter 1? Like, do you think she was a suspect for the mastermind all along? Oh, case 4. Okay. I got it in 4 or 5 because I legit forgot she existed. Yeah, right. I mean, her being useless and having nothing to do is not something that you even notice until, like, chapter 4 or 5. Right? I feel like after chapter 4 happens, and she's not a victim or a killer, that's when you start to piece together that she's not relevant. What? Because you know she's not going to play a role in chapter 5. Right? You know that chapter 5 at that point is reserved for Kokichi, Maki, and Kaito. You know it has to be. So at that point, yeah, you can sort of figure out maybe she's the mastermind. I do think there is something to be said for the fact that the first two games don't have a mastermind in the group, so maybe the third game doesn't too, I think that that could play a role in sort of hiding Tsumugi a little bit. Because if you think about it, it would have been way more obvious if chapter 6 and chapter 2-6 in the first two games, right? If the mastermind was always a member of the group, then it was really obvious. But the fact that it wasn't necessarily even anyone kind of hit her a little bit. Got it in 5 big time, because when it is revealed Monokuma didn't know who the killer was, she finally started talking. Did she? Is that true? Did she, like, step up? I didn't notice that. Hello? Hello, Gwen. But yeah, I think this is my case tier list. Does anyone have any major disagreements? I took a long time to explain this. I've yapped a lot. Does anyone have any major disagreements? DL1 and 2 had the mastermind in the 16, but they didn't, right? They did not. Not really. Like, Junko was not really part of the 16. In fact, she was literally not part of the 16. And in Danganronpa 2, Junko was the mastermind again, right? Izuru doesn't count. Hajime doesn't count, in my opinion. Maybe he does, but you can see I put 2-6 pretty low, so I barely care about distinguishing the details of it, because I put it pretty low. I'm a very big DR2 shill. I'm kind of surprised by 2-6 being as low as it is, but I don't necessarily disagree with it. Basically, I mean, the majority of the reason why this is so low is because my favorite thing about Danganronpa is the murder mystery cases. I love them. I think the overarching story has always been the weakest part of the game, right? Like, you don't need Hope's Peak, Kyoko, or Hope's Peak Academy, Future Foundation. You don't need any of that shit to do a Danganronpa game. So the overarching story cases, right? The chapter 6, where there's no actual case to be solved, those are the worst parts of the game. And if you think about 2-6 compared to 1-6 and 3-6, 3-6 and 1-6 at least actually do have a murder to solve, right? This is a retrial. This is a retrial. 2-6 doesn't even have a murder to solve. This is just an investigation as you go room to room, reading exposition on boring fanfic-like backstory, and then you do a trial where you stand in a circle and talk about that fanfic and get shocked from time to time. Like, this is a really bad story. The only reason why I tolerate 2-6 is because it comes after a good game. Like, it comes after a good game that I've put a lot of hours into, right? Like, 2-6 is terrible on its own. That's my opinion on that. It's confirmed that 2x2 is mainly the same but with a new scenario? Is it? I thought it was confirmed that 2x2 is an alternate game mode, right? You can either play the original story, or you can play this other story that's a little bit bigger. Your Honor, I simply just really like Hajime.